I say to the whole world, India will identify, track, and punish every terrorist and their backers. We will pursue them to the ends of the earth. India's spirit will never be broken by terrorism.
कि अफ्रीकन यूनियन को G20 की स्थायी सदस्यता दी जाए। मेरा विश्वास है कि इस प्रस्ताव पर हम सबकी सहमति है।
It's the dead of night in an African coastal town. Waves lap against a pier where newly arrived patrol boats painted in Indian camouflage are quietly unloaded. Locals murmur, "These will guard our waters from pirates," they say. Yet within months, some of those vessels appear in exercises alongside foreign warships, shore up contesting claims to maritime boundaries or get used during internal security crackdowns. Meanwhile, India's diplomats are on air, in global forums, framing themselves as champions of peace, cooperation, and human rights. How does a nation win praise for peacekeeping while expanding its arms deals, giving credit lines for defense equipment, and nudging militaries across Africa into new dependencies? What are the strings attached? And what does it mean when you preach peace but furnish the tools of war? To understand exactly how India walks this tightrope and what it's really aiming for, we need to look closer at the deals, the strategies, and the contradictions. It starts with what has changed in India's posture towards Africa. India has long held a reputation in Africa, sending teachers, building infrastructure, offering scholarships. Also, peacekeeping. India is among the top troop contributors in UN missions across Africa. But over the past few years, India's approach has shifted. It's not just sending in engineers and doctors under the UN blue helmets. It's selling weapons, offering credit lines for military hardware, entering defense manufacturing deals on the continent. Why the shift? Partly because India wants to grow its defense industry, and partly because geopolitical competition is heating up. China is very active in Africa, other powers too. India sees opportunity not just for economics but for influence, and influence often comes with guns, ships, training. But is there a tension between the image of peace and the reality of arms trade? We'll see some surprises soon. Look at one example. In May 2025, India offered a $200 million defense credit line to Angola. That's not charity, it's leverage. Angola is modernizing its military and expanding its sources away from Russia. This credit line allows Angola to buy Indian defense equipment, get training, support, overhaul platforms. India is giving not just hardware, but influence over maintenance, supply, repair. Another program, India invites African militaries to joint exercises, to train in India, to buy Indian equipment, sometimes at preferential finance. These are not small-scale border patrol arms. They include serious platforms, maritime surveillance tools, drones, interceptors. Export targets have been growing. India's defense exports rose significantly in recent years. These deals often come with narratives: defense capability enhancement, stability, promoting peace and security. But capability can be used many ways, some benign, some less so. What matters is who holds the strings afterwards, and that becomes clearer when we look at India's strategic goals. India's goal isn't just selling more rifles, it's multi-dimensional, geopolitical competition. India perceives that China, and to some extent Russia, are expanding influence in Africa. By offering defense partnerships, India can counterbalance that presence. Maritime security and trade routes. Much of Africa's coastline lies along the Indian Ocean. Piracy, illegal fishing, sea route security are concerns not just for African countries but for India's trade and energy supply. Naval exercises, patrol craft, transfers are ways to protect shared interests, raw materials and economic ties. Africa has resources. India needs minerals, oil, gas, as well as growing markets. Defense deals help bind African states into supply chains, training links, dependency and maintenance and support. This strengthens diplomatic relations and gives India more access and leverage. Global prestige. A rising power wants recognition not just as a peaceful partner, but as someone who can protect interests, support friends, be part of security conversations. Defense exports, being seen in joint exercises, having presence in maritime patrols, all help build that image. Yet these strategic goals can conflict with the peace narrative. How does one maintain moral high ground while selling arms? That tension creates contradictions we'll explore next. India's official statements often stress peace, non-interference, cooperation, capacity building, but some of its actions muddy the clarity, dual usage and ambiguity. Some equipment given or sold for maritime security might be used for surveillance of opposition or for internal security work. The line between defense against external threat and control over internal dissent can blur. Who watches? What oversight exists? Dependency and influence. Countries that accept Indian credit lines or equipment often also accept Indian training, spare parts, sometimes limitations or conditions on usage. This creates political leverage. If a country becomes unable to maintain equipment without Indian parts or training, it may shape its policies accordingly. Quality, accountability, and unintended consequences. Africa has many fragile states. Arms and military tools delivered without strong governance may wind up misused, sold off, or exacerbating conflicts. Research shows that high arms imports tend to correlate with higher levels of internal violence in some circumstances. Science direct peacekeeping versus arming. India remains a big actor in non-peacekeeping missions. Peacekeepers are meant to protect civilians, rebuild infrastructure, support elections. But selling arms or giving defense credits is a different role, a role that sometimes supports militarization more than restraint. How can the peace actor ensure it is not fueling the very crises it says it wants to prevent? These contradictions are not invisible. They lead to criticism both from African civil society and international observers. But the biggest question, how India navigates these contradictions going forward, may shape its legacy. It's easy to cast African states as passive actors, just accepting whatever India offers, but many are choosing India precisely because of certain features, seeking alternatives. Some African nations want to reduce dependence on Russian or Chinese suppliers. India offers competitive pricing, or loans, or local production collaborations. For example, in Morocco, with Indian companies like Tata, playing powers off one another, by having multiple partners, countries can negotiate better, get better terms, assert more autonomy. India becomes one among many, not always dominant. Leverage through training and joint exercises. African militaries often value the training, technology transfer, and interoperability that comes with partnering with India. They see chances to build their own capacity not just as consumers of hardware, but as partners in manufacturing, maintenance, doctrine, domestic political trade-offs. Some leaders accept arms deals in return for promises of security or for political stability. Sometimes populations demand stronger militaries when insurgencies or crime are high, so the demand side is real. These choices matter. They mean the story isn't just India doing stuff to Africa. It's Africa helping shape what India can do, and how far the arms while peace narrative can stretch. If India continues expanding arms exports and military engagements, while continuing to posture as a peace advocate, what are the risks? Reputational risk. If weapons or platforms sold by India are used in human rights abuses, internal repression, cross-border aggressions, India could be blamed. That could hit its global moral capital. Strategic overreach, arms, naval patrols, training operations cost money. If projects fail or backfire diplomatically, costs might outweigh benefits. Arms diffusion and escalation. More arms in the region could lead to arms races between neighboring states or make conflicts more lethal. Debt dependency traps, defense credit lines, reliance on foreign spare parts, maintenance dependency combined receiving, states in long-term obligations, potential for conflict collateral. If weapon systems intended for defensive or maritime security are diverted, conflict zone spillovers or misuse can harm civilians. What India does next, how it frames conditions of deals, how transparent it is, whether it embeds peace-building or conflict prevention components will determine whether the arms push supports or undermines its peace narrative. India is no longer just the peacekeeper on the ground in Africa. It's also becoming a major provider of military tools, training, and credit. Its rhetoric speaks of harmony, development, cooperation. Its actions show strategic ambition, capability building, influence seeking. These two faces, peace and arms, are not always in conflict. When handled carefully, military cooperation can support stability, helping countries defend against piracy or external threats, or building capacity to respond to natural disasters. But there is a thin line between helping and fueling conflict. In the end, whether India's strategy succeeds will depend on whether it keeps its peace. Promise real. Will it demand responsibility in how its exports are used? Will it ensure its defense loans don't become dependencies? Will it support governance, human rights, transparency, so that arming doesn't become arming for harm? Because if it can do those things, it might indeed manage the rare feat, being both trusted partner of peace and serious player in global security, and that would mean it isn't just preaching peace, it's living it.